Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lulu Freistad. I am the co-founder and executive director of Smart Elections, and I want to welcome you to this evening's training for nonpartisan election observation, also known as poll watching. And we're going to be training for the New York City area this evening, but a lot of the principles apply to almost any polling location across the country, and certainly in New York, it's fairly consistent. So the first thing I want to do is just tell you a few things about our organization. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you our website and tell you a little bit about us. We are a fairly young organization. We're about 5 years old. We started in 2019. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit. We work with people across the political spectrum. And one of the things that we find is that people across the political spectrum are really interested in fair elections and often have the same concerns. So we don't talk to people about politics and their political views. We talk to them about fair elections. And by doing that, we find that we're able to work with people who have vastly different views collaboratively in a very a very effective environment, just to focus on having fair, secure, accurate, accessible, inclusive elections that are transparent and publicly verifiable, that the public has confidence in. So those are our goals. And SMART is an acronym, and it stands for Secure, Marked, and Audited by Hand for those who are able. We also work with members of the disability rights community to make sure elections are accessible and accurate. R is for the right to vote, and T is for transparent. And just a little bit about us. I told you our goals. We are transforming U.S. elections, improving security, providing public oversight, and advocating for voting rights, accessibility, accuracy, and transparency. We want the public to have full confidence in election results. So one of the main things that we do is that we train people to do what's called nonpartisan election observation. And one of the reasons that we do that is because there are sometimes discrepancies in election results, meaning there are inaccuracies, and sometimes they're discovered and sometimes they're not. And one of the things that from our research, talking to the public, based on documentary work that I've done in the past as a documentary filmmaker, is that we find that people do have questions about the election results, and rather than sweeping them under the rug, the best thing that we can do is to try to observe the elections carefully and make sure that those discrepancies are reconciled and try to eliminate them as much as possible in the process. So most of the work that we're doing is not about gotcha. It's not about, trying to knock one candidate off the ballot over another. It's about transparency. It's about building confidence. And as a nonpartisan election observer, you'll be part of that process. You'll be part of that team. And one of the things that we really focus on is having a professional demeanor. And as a nonpartisan election observer, even if you're working for a candidate, in which case you may have a partisan outlook, you want your behavior always to be professional, respectful, polite. You sometimes may be treated with disrespect. I've been treated in ways that I really was uncomfortable in some circumstances. People will get angry, they'll yell at you sometimes, but it's very important for our team always to be professional and respectful and polite. If something goes wrong, you really want to write it down, take notes, and report it back up the chain, not engage in some sort of altercation or any sort of argument with people. So we are always trying to be professional, and our organization overall is nonpartisan. And so I just want to start out by showing you some of the things that have happened to us in the past that have really made us emphasize election observation. And one of the things, I'm an election security journalist, and I, early on in my career, made a documentary film where I interviewed hackers, and I actually filmed them hacking a US voting machine. This was long before 2020, long before 2016. This was in 2007, actually. And I was petrified. It really changed my perspective when I saw how easy it can be actually to hack electronic voting machines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I just have to check that the audio is on. And I'm going to just play you, this is a 5-minute clip that'll give you some idea of some of the things that we've experienced that do make us want to be as careful as possible about elections and election results.
There's a lot at stake. Control. We have had election fraud. There's a lot at stake. control of the American government, control of the economy, control of the military. When there's a lot at stake, there's an incentive to fraud. The difference between our history of fraud and computerized fraud is that with computerized fraud, you can set up a program that basically gives you the number of votes you need, switches, deletes, adds, without leaving a trace. Computer professionals pretty much agree that the system is tremendously vulnerable.
I'm Alex Halderman. I'm a graduate student at Princeton University.
I'm Ari Feldman, and I'm also a graduate student at Princeton University. My interests are computer security and technology policy. This machine has two locks, one that covers both the power switch and the memory card slot. And the memory card slot is really all that's needed to introduce malicious software on the machine.
All someone would need is access to one of these machines for 1 minute.
Alex over here, who has modest locksmithing skills, is able to pick it in under 10 seconds.
Sorry, I just want to check. Are you seeing my screen?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You are?
Yes.
Okay, great.
All right, so that was very hard. This machine has already been infected with our vote stealing software, and there won't be any signs in the pre-election testing that the machine is infected. Now we're ready to run our election. This is the race for President of the United States. The candidates are George Washington and Benedict Arnold.
They walked me through the election.
And so we can cast a vote for George Washington, and then press next.
I'm going to cast my vote for George Washington as well. And again, George Washington, father of our country. I think I favor him over most notorious traitor. And all right, so
now we have 3 votes for George Washington?
that's right. The total so far is 3 votes for George Washington, no votes for Benedict Arnold. Now election day is over. We're going to end the election and print out the totals. And we see the total: 1 vote for George Washington, 2 votes for Benedict Arnold. How did this happen? Our demonstration vote-stealing software running inside the machine switched 2 of the votes from George Washington to Benedict Arnold. It switched all of the records, so there's no way to go back now and find out that the actual result was 3 votes for George.
The Diebold AccuVote TS voting machine that the Princeton team hacked is an earlier version of the machines currently in use in Allentown.
I'm Levi Price. I'm the Chief of Staff at Lehigh County.
And you were the one who purchased the new Diebold voting machines.
I was involved in the purchasing. When we looked at those, we looked at the possibility of tampering. We changed the passwords for each election.
The password didn't stop us for more than a few seconds.
One, you have to have the technological capability of altering the software.
The memory card is just a standard off-the-shelf memory card that you use in your digital camera. The smart cards you can buy over the internet.
We have 700 separate machines. Each of those 700 separate machines is locked with a different key.
You don't need to break all 700 locks. Because a viral attack is possible, all you need to do is infect one or a small number of machines. And then the virus and your malicious vote-stealing software will spread from machine to machine during normal election procedures.
But what if we had a paper trail for the touchscreen machines? Would that make them more reliable?
There is no reason to trust a touchscreen or DRE system with or without a paper trail, period. You can hack the paper trails as easily as you can the internal numbers. Matt Bishop is one of the foremost experts in the world on computer security.
Many of the vulnerabilities can be exploited in a very straightforward manner.
Meaning it's not too hard.
Meaning it's not hard at all.
Are the elections being rigged?
Yes, our evidence shows that they are.
Evidence like the 2004 presidential recount results in Ohio. Jesse Tendler was a regional coordinator for that recount.
I was in charge of about 10 different counties. Not only was there a discrepancy between the hand recount and the original certified vote, in most cases there was also a discrepancy between the hand recount and the machine recount in every precinct in every county.
That's a little confusing, so let's look at it carefully. In almost every precinct he was involved in, there was a difference between the hand count and the machine count. Here are some of the differences. In Bradford Village, the official certified machine count had 3 votes more than the hand count. In Piqua 2A, the machine count had 8 votes more. Troy 3E, 14 votes more. The machine seems to be adding a small number of votes each time, but could those small changes really have mattered?
The differences are absolutely meaningful differences. Difference of 6 votes per precinct could change the results of the entire election.
We have had election fraud.
So I will just say a few things about that clip. One is that it is a little bit old. It was made in 2007, and there have been improvements in that time. New York has never had totally paperless voting machines, thankfully. So those voting machines that we were looking at in the film are worse than the voting machines here in New York State. And New York State does take some very good precautions in terms of the types of activities that we showed in that film. So, for example, New York does have their computers that are used to program the voting machines. They're supposed to be completely what's called air gapped, completely separate from the internet. And the voting machines are always completely separate from the internet. And so there are some good protections in place, and we really appreciate that, as well as the fact that New York has hand-marked paper ballots now. We are concerned New York in the future could move to a system without hand-marked paper ballots, and you could really start to see more of the dangers that we showed in that clip. But at the moment, we have the hand-marked paper ballots. It does not mean that the voting machines could not be programmed incorrectly. There are still ways to get to voting machines, even when they are not connected to the internet. Often that type of hack comes from an official software update. We've seen that over and over again. That was, in fact, what happened with one of the biggest hacks called the SolarWinds hack, where the malware was planted through an official update because the official company was actually hacked, was actually compromised, and then their official software was sent out with malware. So it is really good for us to be checking. And then in addition to that, there's also mistakes that happen with voting machines. Voting machines just can be programmed incorrectly by accident. We have seen that in many times. I don't have time to actually go into all the different mistakes that we've seen. We've seen it in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Georgia. There's a lot of different instances where Michigan, they programmed the machines and they counted the votes, 6,000 votes incorrectly. So it's not always necessarily be a deliberate malware attack. It could be a mistake, and it could also be a mistake in terms of like much more common mistakes where batches of ballots get run through twice, either deliberately or by accident. So we've seen things like that where ballots get counted 2 times, or entire flash drives get forgotten about and left out, and hundreds of votes, thousands of votes even don't get counted. So these are just samples of incidents that have happened around the country. I want to show you now one in particular that we found here in our district, one of the first times that we were poll watching. And so one of the main things that we do here when we train you as a poll watcher, really the main goal is that we're going to be comparing 2 main numbers. We're going to be comparing the number of voters who vote, meaning the number of voters who sign in. And in New York, those are on electronic poll books. So you'll be looking at the electronic poll books, and you'll be comparing the number of voters who sign in with the number of ballots that get scanned. So it's called a voter to scanner comparison. And it's actually pretty straightforward. And hopefully those numbers are going to be identical or almost identical. Sometimes they don't match exactly, but you want them to be ballpark the same. You certainly never want more ballots than voters. There's never any reason for you to have more ballots than people who vote, right? Because where would they come from? Sometimes you have fewer ballots because maybe somebody checks into the polling place and then their kid calls them and says, yeah, I need you to come and pick me up right away. And they run out and they don't actually scan their ballot. So maybe they check in, but they don't scan their ballots. So you might have fewer ballots than voters, but you're never going to have more ballots than voters. That's a problem if you see that. So I'm going to show you a couple instances, one where the numbers match and one where the numbers don't match. So I think let's start with one where the numbers do match, because I think that's what you're going to find most of the time. And that's what we are hoping for. That's how we increase confidence in the results, is that we see that these numbers do match. So this was in 2022. And we went to Bushwick campus. This is in Brooklyn. And we have a form that we have people fill out. And you will be filling it out. That was the candidate that we were observing for, Paperboy Prince. And this is the form. And you can see I filled it out like by hand in the polling place. It might be a little bit messy, but it's okay. You'll it's clear enough for us to know what we're doing. So you're going to get this form. It has the location, and that is the actual location of the polling place. And the address there is not your personal address. That is the address of the polling place, the date, your name, and the candidate that you're observing for. And we have a few candidates. As I said, we have 3 districts right now. So you'll be assigned one of those districts. Perhaps you already have been. Now you're going to go, when you arrive, you're going to put the time that you arrive. You already have the date there. So we know this was August 21st. And I arrived at this polling place at 4:50 p.m. That was just before closing, I think. And then I went to the tables where people check in to vote for the electronic poll books. There were 4 tables, and I wrote down the number from each of the poll books. I looked at the number myself. Sometimes they might read you the number, and you just say to them politely, "I'm sorry, I've been instructed to read the number myself. Can you turn the poll book around so that I can see it?" And they will. And you'll be polite, and they'll normally be relatively friendly. So they'll turn that poll book around so you can see it. And if you're not sure where the number is, just ask them. Usually it's pretty obvious. It's right in the center. And you can tell that's the number of voters that have signed in. But if you're not sure the first time, you just ask, "Is this the number of voters that you've had sign in?" And they'll tell you. So then you're going to write it down. I wrote down at the 4 tables, 72 voters, 58 voters, 35 voters, 33 voters. And you can
What are
see
the number? Okay, go ahead.
No, what's your question, Helen?
What are those numbers on top?
Okay, those are the election district. So I was at district 228, 223, 234, and 647.
Got it. Okay.
That seems a little weird. Usually election districts are 2 numbers. I might have
Those are
written,
the EDs?
I'm not sure what I wrote there. Normally what I write there are the election districts. Yeah, I think in that case, those don't look like election districts number to me. I wonder if I wrote down the number of the, I think it looks like I wrote down the serial number of the electronic poll book. You don't have to do that. Sometimes I write down a little more information than what you need to do. Concentrate on getting the number of voters, especially your first time. And I do think it's useful to put your election districts down. Each of the tables, in early voting, you won't have election district tables because everybody votes together mixed in. But on election day, each table is usually a different election district. So we can actually add in a line on the form so that it's more clear to put your election district there. But the main thing, you're going to get the number of the voters who checked in. And you can see I added that up. It's 198. And you can do this math really fast, like on your phone. So it won't take you long to figure out if it's going to reconcile. But what you first do, you want to do this right close together. As soon as you get the numbers of the voters who logged in, go immediately to the scanners. If you wait, then it's more likely that the numbers aren't going to match because maybe a few people will vote before you get over to the scanners. So as soon as you're done with the electronic poll books, then you're going to be, working with the poll workers, and you'll say, "I'd like to look at the scanners next." And so then you go and look at the scanners. Here, there were 4 scanners. And what you're looking at is the public count. For me, it was the end of the day, 4:56 p.m. And I wrote down 50 voters, 49 voters, and 49 voters. And you might think that's weird that they have the exact same number. But usually if it's like that, it's in a polling place where they basically form a line and they direct the voters to one machine at a time. So they kind of control traffic. And that's why it'll come out even like that. So then I added those numbers up. I added up the number of ballots that had been scanned, and I put that in here, total ballot scanners 198. And then I added up the number of voters who had voted, and I brought that number down here, 198. And then the next column is the discrepancy. If there's any difference, I would put a difference there. But here it was the same, and that's 0. And that is exactly what we're hoping to see. We want the same number of voters as ballots. And most of the time, that is what you're going to see. And then there's some other numbers that we will put in called the protective counter, but I don't want to get too complicated in the beginning. I want to just keep it very simple. And then we can get, there's other information you can take, but I want to make sure We don't have a lot of time and I want to get the basics down. So that's an instance where the numbers match. Now I'm going to show you an instance where the numbers didn't match. So this was the year before at a different location in Brooklyn in 2021. And I went to the polling location. And in this instance, see if I can blow this up. Is that getting a little bit bigger on your screen? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. I can get this, I can actually pull this document up and we can get it a little bit bigger.
That's fine.
It's good like that.
You can see it? Okay. So this is the same form. This one is in color instead of black and white. It's the same form. At the beginning, you can see I put the location, the date, my name. So I went to tables 1, 2, 3, 4, and in this case, they had 5. In this case, I saw the numbers myself on tables 4 and 5. You can see, saw personally, and then they were already closing down. So on the first 3 tables, they wouldn't show them to me, but they showed me their paperwork, and they had written down the number of voters who checked in, and it was 128, 77, 66, 78, and 131. And I added those up, it was 480. And then I went over to the scanners and I looked at the scanner numbers personally, and they were 240, 239, 242, 227, that looks like, and 230. And I added that up, and that was 1,178. And then I brought down my number of voters who had voted, and I did the math, and that was 698 more ballots than voters who checked in. And remember, we said that's the one thing that we really do not want to see. We are not expecting to see more ballots than voters, because where did those ballots come from? You only are allowed to have as many ballots as you have voters. So this was very concerning to me. And I reported it to the inspector, and they were extremely upset with me. They did not want to see this information, and they started yelling at me. And we did wind up doing public records requests to the New York City Board of Elections. We actually did 4 different public records requests, but they never explained this. We asked for the list of voters who voted at that location, and they never gave us that, even though it was, illegal for them to basically just completely ignore the public records requests. And so this was never explained. So this is basically, you've now seen an example of what you're hoping to see when the election data looks correct, and what you might see if the election data looks incorrect. And I want to just go over a few other points in terms of what you'll do when you arrive at the polling place. And then I'll take some questions. I think maybe let's take some questions now in case you have questions on this part that I showed you so far.
The inspector yelled at you. You took your papers that you had written your results on. What did you do with them? I mean, it resulted eventually in a public records request, but what? I'm not you. Let's say I have these papers. Where do I go and what do I do with them?
Okay, so you'll be in touch with us. I'll be giving everybody my cell phone personally. So if you are encountering any issues, small to medium to large issues, then you can text me and we'll be on hand to try to give you support, to try to connect you with the campaign manager, and if possible, if something's really serious, with an attorney. It's hard because most of the time we're working with campaigns that have really limited resources. And even though you might want to take something to court, you might not have the resources to do that. So at the end of the day, Helen, it may be, if we find something, it may be that the best that we can do is to do another report and get that to the public. But we are working, at a larger and larger scale. In April, we had poll watchers in 14 counties across New York. So that was, starting to expand. We started out just in New York City, and we hope by November that we will have poll watchers and observers all over the state. And in fact, we're expanding into other states. So as we scale up, we hope to gain more resources and be able to act rapidly, take rapid action in instances where we do find problems. And one of the reasons why that's important is because That's actually what we think that's going to increase public confidence. If the public sees that we have observers in many locations, and for the most part, things are okay, and we can say, well, we did have problems, but they were in these instances, and we took action, and we, investigated and found out what happened there. That is what we believe will raise public confidence. So to answer your question, you'll be working with the support team. You'll have a phone number that you can text back to, and we'll let you know what to do. Of course, you want to document everything carefully, take down the names and the titles of anybody that you speak to, write down carefully in your notes what happened, because later on you may not remember exactly. So make sure to write it down at the moment. And then we will be asking you to send those reports back to us either by a scan or by, taking a photograph with your phone. Mike?
Few questions and possible ideas. Yeah, I'm also thinking about, when the supervisor at the site or whatever is, whatever way they're doing, not letting you do what legally you're allowed to do, or they're not following the rules, and they just say, hey, we're not going to let you see this, or you can't go over there, that kind of thing. Would it be helpful, number one, to have a copy of the state law, which sets out in writing exactly what we're allowed to do? Also, is it an option to call the police officers on the scene, who are manning the site, to tell them, look, I'm supposed to be able to do this. They're not letting me do it. And I believe you're not able to take video inside a polling site, but if those officers have body cameras and you can call them over and you're confronting, the person who's violating the law, and then later we can ask for that body camera footage. So we'll have video proof that they're violating the law. That's just an idea. I don't know. What do you think of all that?
So first off, yes, we absolutely send you into the polling place with the statutes. So everybody was emailed a packet already, a observation packet, and it includes a page of the statutes for New York, which apply to poll watching. They are a little bit vague, I'll be frank with you. They basically say that you can be there, I think, 15 minutes before the polls open, which is about, I think, 5:45 a.m., and that you can stay until at the end of the process after the proclamation of the results. So that's basically, you can be there till the very end. And it tells you how many poll watchers can be. Only one person can be what they call inside the guardrail at a time per candidate. That's fine. And we're not going to have more poll watchers than that. So that's not a problem. There is a fairly strong tradition in New York of what you're allowed to do. And we've been doing this for several years now. So they're starting to get more used to us. And for the most part, I don't have as much trouble now as I had when I first started. So the protocol is basically, you're going to go into the polling place, take a few pictures of the external of the building, especially get like some vote signs, like vote here is usually one of the signs, and get a wide shot of the building. Those would be for our reports, so that we have a physical shot, a picture of the location. If there's a name of the building, try to get that. Try to take a selfie or two of yourself at the location if you don't mind. That's also helpful. And then you're going to go into the polling place. And I'm actually going to pull up the packet now, because I think that's just going to help us. So for you to see it in writing as I go through it. And I'm going to go through pretty quickly. Normally I go through a little bit more slowly, but I think we're trying to just keep this to an hour. So, and most of these things are pretty straightforward. I don't think it's anything that's going to be new to any of you. So here is the packet that you've already received, and it has my name and phone number on it. And the best thing is usually to text me, and I will also be in the polls on election day. So I may not be able to respond immediately, but if we have somebody who's just standing by, we will get you another phone number as well. And we'll also get you the phone number of the campaign that you are observing for, so that you can contact the campaign directly if anything happens. So these are some of the guidelines. Be polite and respectful at all times. You're representing our organization, you're representing the candidate, and you're representing the concept of nonpartisan election observation, which is about politely and respectfully observing the process and making sure that it's fair and transparent. So even if people engage in bad behavior, we don't engage in bad behavior. Bring a pen and paper, a notebook. Never touch the equipment, the paperwork, or anything that is part of the official election process. We are observers, from the key word to observe, and we're not allowed to touch anything. Don't wear any buttons or clothing for a candidate or issue while poll watching. No electioneering is allowed in a polling place. Don't carry materials like brochures. You're there as a poll watcher, and they're very meticulous about no electioneering. So you can get into trouble just accidentally if you wind up with a button or something on. So just give yourself a once over before you go in and make sure everything is tucked away. That could be considered electioneering. Do not speak to or interfere with voters. Do not help them vote. I have had voters ask me to help them, even friends of mine, and I got in trouble for helping them to vote, even though they reached out to me. They were like, Lulu, can you help me? No, you're a poll watcher, so you cannot help them. Do not interfere with the voting process. Poll workers, supervisors, or election inspectors. Ask your question at a time when they're not busy. Remember to be polite and supported. They have a long day, especially election day. They start at 6 a.m. and they start at 5 because the polls open at 6. And the polls close at 9 and they get wrapped up around 10. So it can be a 17-hour day for them. So really just try to just understand if they're a little on edge. It's a long day for them. They may be rude to you. Do not respond in kind. Stay neutral and polite. You're going to need a certificate, and we're going to get you that. The candidates are signing certificates, and it will have your name and the location and every election district at that location, which is really important. They may get technical, especially during early voting, where there may be more election districts at that location than technically your candidate is representing, right? So maybe there's 20 election districts at that location, and your candidate is a candidate for 10 of those election districts. And they may say to you, well, your candidate is only, covering those 10 election districts. And so we're not going to let you see the electronic poll books. We're not going to let you see the scanners. And in that case, you're going to have to report back to us, and we'll, see if we need to get a candidate or an attorney there to back you up. Basically, if the election districts are mingled, which they are during early voting, they really legally need to allow you to see anybody who signs into the poll books and all of the figures on the scanners, because there's no way for you to separate out your candidate's voters. They're all commingled. So hopefully they're not going to be technical. It really varies location to location. Most of the time they're polite and they're cooperative. So you're going to present your certificate when you arrive. So I already talked to you about taking some photos. I'll be right there, Dion. You're going to go into the polling location, politely identify yourself, and ask to see the inspector or the coordinator or the supervisor. They use different titles sometimes, but you can just ask to see. Usually the coordinator is a good word to use. Ask to see the coordinator, give that person your certificate, and sign into the book. And then you're going to start the process that I described already, where you're going to check the electronic poll books and you're going to check the scanners. Dion?
I was going to say, from the information I provided, and I can share it with Michael Hanlon too for the 70th, is a breakdown on election day of all the polling sites and the ED. So we can separate the EDs by that if they get technical. You know what I mean? Because you've already seen what I broke down. So if anybody needs that for the other districts, I can show them how to do that.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure what you're saying. You know all the election districts at that location.
No, all the locations are listed. So what I emailed you is for the 71st, all the EDs. It has all locations. So let's say you go to the Armory. If you look at those 2 sheets, you can mark down every ED from those 2 sheets on your PollWatcher certificate, and they can't really say anything because all of them are supposed to be there. Understand?
Yes, if your candidate, if all of the districts at the Armory are part of your candidate's district. Technically, your candidate can only authorize you to observe for the districts that they're running for. So if you have 2 districts at the Armory that are not in your candidate's assembly district, if you have 2 election districts that are not in his assembly district, they could technically say to you, well, there's 2 election districts that aren't in your assembly district, and therefore we're not going to let you see the poll books because there would be voters.
So you mean the entire poll book they won't let me see, even though I have all, let's say, 10 EDs at that one polling site written down? So I
Yeah,
can't see
say that
anything?
you have 10, but say there's 12 total. So there's 2. So they'll say, well, there's voters in the poll book that aren't in your district. And so we can't let you see the numbers on the poll book. I've had them say that to me. Because,
Wow. Michael, you hear this? Wow.
yeah. So this is why I'm saying, make sure you have all your actual election districts on the certificate. And then we'll do our best to navigate that.
But like I was looking at what he just said, the Fort Washington Armory, which is an early voting site, and they right now are covering a lot of the election districts in the 7-1, which Dion is working on, but they only have, I think, like 2 or so election districts from the 7-2. But if he has a PollWatcher certificate, which says, all of these election districts in the 7-1, then he will be able to see the data relevant to his race, even though he's not authorized for the 7-2, right?
Well, it's just that it's commingled. Everybody's on early voting. Everybody's voting on the same polling books. You can't sort it out. You don't know. What they'll do is they'll give you sometimes a list of these are all the voters who voted in your district. But that isn't what you want. You want to look at the poll book numbers and you want to see if the poll books match the scanners. So
And the poll books would be mixed for the 2 assembly districts? Or there'll be 2 separate poll books?
In the early voting, everybody votes mixed in together. I don't think they separate out the districts for early voting.
She's talking about election day. On election day, Michael, they will not show me the poll book if 2 of the EDs are not on my certificate for my AD. Understand?
No, but what I'm asking is, like in the Armory, if they got early voting going on from certain election districts from 2 different assembly districts, aren't they going to have separate poll books? One for the election districts from the 7-1 and one for the people from the 7-2?
Not for early voting, they won't. It's all mixed in for early voting.
Right,
For,
they can't
for
do
election day, they will. But what I think we can do, which is useful that we have 71 and 72 with us, we will send the poll watchers with a certificate from both of the assembly districts. So we'll send them with a certificate from 71 and a certificate from 72. And I think all of the election districts will be covered that way. And I'll actually,
Whoa. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I want to talk to you offline about it. I have another strategy. So let me just talk to you offline about it. Okay. Let's just move on because I think in general, many people are going to be confused by that. Sheridan, thank you for joining us. Are you working with the Zinnemann campaign?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me. I'm actually part of the VITA General Council Committee. And so Joan told me about this.
Okay, so we're almost wrapping up here, but we've recorded, and so you'll be able to go back and watch. Okay.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, sorry, because I was actually driving, and she just told me about this like about an hour ago. So my apologies.
I totally understand. We're all just scrambling to try to, make sure that we assist the candidates and get this observation in. So right now we're just talking about what happens when you go into the polling place. You're going to be receiving a packet that tells you basically what you're going to do step by step. And I'll just review this very quickly since you're just joining us, but you're going to be polite and respectful. Bring a pen and paper and a notebook. Don't touch the equipment. Don't wear any buttons or anything that could be construed as electioneering. Don't speak to or interfere with the voters. Don't interfere with the voting process. Always be kind, neutral, and polite, no matter how they treat you. You're going to go into the polling place. You're going to find the inspector. You're going to offer them your certificate, which is signed by the candidate. And then what you're going to do is you're going to be comparing the number of voters who voted. So you're going to look at the electronic poll books. You'll go to each table and ask them to politely, hi. And one of the things that I highly recommend is that you get a lanyard and have your name and have it say PollWatcher. And we'll actually, I can make those and try to help you make them available or show you sites where you can download them. Any lanyard that you have from a conference, you can easily just switch out, put a piece of paper in there and write your name on it and write PollWatcher, 2 separate words, capital P, capital W. You would be amazed what a difference it makes because you clearly identified yourself as part of the process. You have a role in the process. And when you go in, you introduce yourself and you say, hello, my name's such and such. I'm a poll watcher and here's my certificate. And when you go to the poll book tables, you say, good evening. Thank you for your service. I'm a poll watcher. I'm here to check the numbers on the electronic poll books. Could you please turn the poll book so I could see them? And then you write down the numbers. If you're there first thing in the morning at 6 a.m., it's going to be zeros, we hope. 0, 0, 0, 0. Hopefully no one has voted at 6 a.m. And then you're going to write that down. And then when you come at the end of the night, you're going to go to the electronic poll books and do the same thing and write down how many people voted at each station. Now, once you check your electronic poll book numbers, you go immediately to the scanners. Usually you're going to have to find a different inspector or a different poll worker to take you over there, because there's usually people have their stations. So whatever person you've been interacting with, like the coordinator, you can go back to them and say, I'm ready to see the scanners now. And then you go to the scanners. And again, each of the scanners usually has like a clerk, a poll worker there next to it. Same thing, very polite. Hi, I'm Lulu. I'm a poll watcher. I'm here to look at the numbers on the scanners. And then you're going to look at the numbers on the scanners and you're going to write down how many ballots have been scanned at that election. And I'm going to show you what that voting machine looks like. It's a little bit blurry, I'm sorry, but this should give you a general idea. I'm just checking. Dion, do you know, is it a one-page ballot?
Yes, my candidate is the only candidate on the ballot, and they have judicial delegates. Now,
Okay.
I haven't seen what that looks like. I mean, if you go to vote.nyc, they have sample ballots. I'm not sure if you need that information, but there's sample ballots online that have the candidates and so forth.
Yeah, we do need to look at it. If it's a two-page ballot, then the numbers are a little bit different. But even if it's a two-page ballot, the counter only counts it as one person voting. There are two numbers on here. You can see it's a little bit blurry in the actual screen, but you can see on the sheet here, there's something called a public ballot count and there's something called a protective count. The public ballot count is the one that you're really interested in. That tells you how many ballots have been scanned that day. The protective count is similar to what, like an odometer on your car. The odometer on your car tells you how many miles that car has driven in the entire life of the car. The protective count is the number of pieces of paper that have been scanned on that ballot in the entire life, and then scanned on that machine, an entire life of the machine. And so if it's a two-page ballot, the protective count, it counts 2 pages. But the public count always counts one, no matter what, one voter. So those numbers should always match your poll book numbers. And then it's often good to get the serial number as well. So I think I have here, this is your certificate that you'll get from your candidate, that'll have your name and your election and assembly districts on it and the location. And then you've been over this. So the other thing that I want to show you is this. So this is basically the same form that we were looking at.
We can't see it.
I know
we
you
can't
can't.
see it.
I'm just getting can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just had to switch screens. So this is the same form that I showed you that was in our report. So you're going to have this form, but it'll be blank because you're filling it out. So again, at the top, the location and the address of the location, the date, your name. This will be blank, your certificate from, it'll be whatever candidate you're getting your certificate from. And then you go to your poll book, your electronic poll book tables. You put in what time you're there. Like if it's the start of the day, it might be, 6 a.m. If you go a couple times during the day, you can do another, you can check again multiple times. The main thing that we want is for you to go at the start of the day and the end of the day. And the forms really only have enough room on the scanners for the start of the day and the end of the day. So if you do checks in the middle of the day, you'll have to put your scanner count like on the back of the page. But basically you're going to go table to table on the electronic poll books. You're going to write down how many voters voted at each table. And then you're going to add those up, how many voters total. Then you're going to go to your scanner and you're looking at your public count start of day, like when you're there at 6 a.m. public counter end of day, like at 9 p.m. when they close on election night. And you're going to write down those numbers, how many ballots were scanned in each scanner. There might be 4 or 5. Usually it's like A, B, C, D, E. It's very rare for them to be more than that. You take your total ballots scanned and add them up. And then you take your total voters and bring that down over here. and you compare them, and hopefully that difference is going to be 0. The protective count, if you feel up to it, I don't want people to get confused, but if you feel up to it, you can put your protective count starting and final, and that will help us determine if the scanners are counting correctly, because then we compare the public counters and the protective counters, and that actually is very helpful. So if you feel up to it, write down that protective counter number as well. And then there's a few other things that we ask you to check. We ask you to check accessibility. Are the ramps there so that somebody could come in a wheelchair, or is there a lift or an elevator? Is the ballot marking device plugged in, turned on? Has a voter used it? Poll tapes, this is only for election day. There are no poll tapes posted for early voting, but on election day at the end of the night, there are poll tapes, and we will encourage you to take a photo or a video of them. I can talk to you more about that. We have a separate organization that helps us with that. If for some reason the numbers don't match from the scanners and the voters who checked in, there are a few other things you can ask for. You can ask for the list of voters who voted at that location, and they have that, and they can print it out for you. And you can also ask for what's called the summary poll book report, which is a total report from the poll book. You really only need to ask for those if for some reason your numbers are not matching. You can ask at each polling station, at each of the electronic poll books, how many affidavits. Each of those stations will have a number. For what reason? Like, a lot of times it's because people came with the wrong address. How many void or spoiled ballots did they have? Did any of the voting machine or electronic poll books or other equipment break down or malfunction while you were there? Were all the seals properly placed on the voting machine, ballots, and media? At the end of the night, they put seals on everything. The voting machines have about 5 seals on them, and then the ballots get seals on them, and the flash drives that they take out of voting machines and put in an envelope, that gets a seal on it. So you just watch that. The first time you do it, it's going to be kind of confusing and a little overwhelming, but after a while, it's going to make sense to you, and you're going to notice when things aren't right. So part of this is just like getting trained, and this is something that you might do in the future also, you know. And then the ballots get transported, usually by a police officer in New York City. Usually it's just one. Something that makes us uncomfortable. We would prefer that they have 2 people always with the ballots at all times, but legally they only have to have 1. Write down the officer's name and badge number. Again, be polite and respectful. The officers are usually very polite. How many officers or people escorted the ballots? And if they're escorted by a person who's not a police officer, ask what political affiliation they are. Were they a Democrat, Republican, or independent? Okay, so that's the information that we try to get you to collect. We're close to the hour now, and I just don't want to assume that people want to stay later. So I just wanted to make sure that we at least got through that much. Helen.
Are we going to get a separate piece of paper for each scanner?
You're going to print those out. Yes, we're going to send you the form, because it's just a lot of work. You're in the Bronx, I'm here in Brooklyn. So the easiest way for us to do this, we found, is for us to email you the form. You have it either as an Excel sheet or a PDF. I like the way the Excel sheet prints out on my printer. If you set it up to print so that it's fitted to the page and you put it landscape, it should print correctly. But some people have trouble with that. So we do send you a PDF that you can try if you have trouble printing the Excel sheet. The reason I like the Excel better is it prints on 2 pages, and you can print on both sides, front and back. With the PDF, it squishes everything into 1 page. So it's a little bit smaller and a little harder to read. Who else had a question up? Dion and then Mike.
I'm glad you add the political party question to it. So here's my question. The rules of engagement, because the rules of engagement on our poll watching certificate in New York City is less extensive than yours. So would you like us to then vote? Because if we have this one with the statutes, they'll laugh at it as well as the one that they know in programs to see, you know?
I don't understand the question.
You already had the statutes. Remember you showed me earlier, had all the PollWatcher rules and regulations? What I was trying to tell you earlier is that that's much different than the PollWatcher certificate they have for New York City. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying.
Okay, let me show them both to you. It's not that different, to be honest. It might seem a little bit different, but it's not that different. So give me 1 second. I'm going to pull them both up for you, and you're going to see sort of how they come to get one. People aren't often that comfortable with statutes, you know, so when they do forms for everyday people, they don't usually get into statutes because it makes people uncomfortable. This is part of the packet that we send you. It shows you the actual statutes here in New York State. So this is from the New York election law, 8-500, and it tells you pretty much what the law says about poll watchers. And it's a little vague, to be frank, but it tells you who can authorize you. Well, first off, it tells you that there can be watchers. So any political committee supporting or opposing a ballot proposal, as well as any party committee, any independent body whose candidates are upon the ballot, this is at the general election, may have 3 watchers at any one time. The reason why we have that highlight with any political committee is that that is one way that we get watchers into the polling stations. We have formed a political action committee, and if there is a referendum on the ballot, then we issue our own certificates as a political action committee. But in this particular election, there's no referendums on the ballot, so it hasn't helped us this time. But you may have, for each election district, 3 watchers at any one time, not more than any one of whom may be within the guardrail. And the guardrail is a theoretical thing. In the olden days, they had an actual guardrail, I guess, but nowadays it just means like in the area where the action is happening, where the electronic poll books are and the scanners are, they consider that the guardrail. So this is for the general election. We are not in the general election. We are actually currently in the primary election. So in the primary election, it's the candidates who appoint the watchers. So it's any candidate on the ballot may have for each election district 3 watchers at any one time, not more than one of whom may be within the guardrail. And watchers shall be appointed by the chair or other officer of any such party committee or by any candidate. We're getting our certificates from the candidates. We have 3 different candidates that we're working with. Then it tells you basically very vaguely in very vague terms that you can be present at least 15 minutes before the unlocking and examination of any voting machine or ballot box at the opening of the polls. So that's basically, the polls open at 6 a.m. So you could be there at like, 5:45. I usually get there right around 6. Usually no one's there yet for the voters. So it's a good time to go. Until after the signing of the inspector's returns and proclamation of the results, which is the very end when they print out what's called the poll tapes, which are these long cash register receipts. And they either have the option legally to post them to the wall or to read them out loud, which has the actual results from the election on them. And that's what they call the proclamation of the results. And they don't really proclaim the results too much anymore. They mostly post them on the wall. Then the appointment of watchers for any election shall be by a certificate in writing issued by the appointing authority. And we showed you, you're going to have that certificate. I will just roll back on these. That's one of the first things I showed you. This is your certificate. It's going to have your name on it, and it's going to have county of whatever county you're in. Could be New York County or Kings County. Those are the 2 counties we're in. Your name, your election districts, and your assembly districts, your candidate's signature, and the location that you're at. So that's your certificate that they're talking about here. And then, so it's by certificate in writing, issued by your candidate, and it shall be delivered to an inspector at the election district, which is what I told you. When you walk in there to the polling place, you ask for the supervisor and you give them your certificate and sign into the book. And then it says each watcher must be a qualified voter in the city or county in which he or she is to serve. No person shall be appointed or act as a watcher who is a candidate. So you can't be a poll watcher for your own election, but candidates have their own rights. Nothing in this subdivision shall be construed as prohibiting any such candidate from visiting a polling place. So candidates can visit their polling places. They just can't be their own poll watchers. So that's technically the statutes. And then I think, Dion, what you're talking about is when you actually get into the information that the Board of Elections presents, they have what's called a poll watcher's guide. And this is kind of like a more general guide that they have pulled from the statutes. So, they have sort of put together this document to ensure fair and honest elections. New York state law provides for poll watchers to observe. Is this what you're talking about, Dion? this information?
Yeah, that's the simplistic version that they're,
Okay.
expecting.
It's really the same thing, but this is sort of written out like, not as a statute. Poll watchers are designated by candidates, political parties, or independent organizations which have candidates on the ballot. That's what the statute said. They just made it sound more everyday language. The role of the poll watchers is to observe elections at the polling site on behalf of a particular candidate, political party, or organization, and where they observe irregularities, report these observations to the election inspector, the police officer, and the Board of Elections. So that's basically what you're instructed to do. If you find irregularities, you're supposed to tell the inspector or report it back to the Board of Elections. But of course, you also report it back to your candidate or to us, your poll watching organization. The qualifications are that you're a voter in the city of New York. That's in the statute. You have to be certified in writing. That's in the statute. You have your certificate, and you have to present the certificate for each election district in the elections to the elections inspector for that election district. And I believe that's also in the statute. Doesn't it say in the statute? Sorry, I'm going to get some water here.
I don't think so. It says they may have for each election district 3 watchers. Could that be construed as having to specify the election district
I think
one
so,
by
yeah.
one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. For example, I already foresee me and Michael Hamill teaming up with 2 poll watch certificates of each to have the collective ED so we can get what we need to get done. So I guess that would count as 2 poll watchers out of the 3, right?
No, you just have one poll watcher and you're going to share a certificate. It's actually the opposite. You're going to have one poll watcher with 2 certificates. So it's not 2 poll watchers. You don't need 2 poll watchers at the same location. But if you have the certificates, it's going to give you full coverage, I think.
Right. But what we said earlier, in which, Michael Hannell might not have all the EDs in one site that I do. And collectively, if I have 18 and it's 20 and he has 2, then theoretically, we both could have 2 poll watcher certificates with all the EDs we need for each of us. I have 2 poll watcher certificates with all the EDs collectively, so does he. Does that make sense?
Yes, but are you both going to be there?
Maybe. I'm just saying that, does that count as 2 of the 3?
Well, Dion, we can, Francesca can give all of your people an authorization as well, and hopefully Julian will give all of us authorizations so that we could check at the, whoever's there can check for both at the same time.
Yeah, if I was you, you got a lot of stations to your locations, and you don't have that many poll watchers. So your best bet is to collaborate and give, as Mike was saying, and as you were saying, Dion, give both of those poll watcher certificates to one poll watcher and let that poll watcher cover that location, and then send another poll watcher, send one of Mike's poll watchers to one location and send one of your poll watchers to another location. And that way you get both locations covered. You're collecting the same information and we're sharing information. We make all of that information completely public. We put it up online or we give it to the candidates directly. So you're going to have that information. But if you want to double up poll watchers, you're still fine. You're allowed up to 3. So, and each candidate can have 3. So you could actually have 6. So you're not going to run into a problem with that. And then just what I'm showing you is that these guidelines, they are basically pulled from the statutes. And that there really is no difference in terms of the content. As far as we can tell, the content is in keeping with the statute. And then they also say, like here, they have a fax of the facsimile. I guess that's a copy of the poll watcher certificate appears on the reverse side of this guide. That's actually where we pulled our certificate from. It allows for 3 poll watchers per election district at any one time for each candidate. This is all in the statutes. It talks about the guardrails. It explains that they don't really exist anymore, but that they are currently interpreted as, the portion of the poll site containing the table used by the inspectors, the equipment, the privacy booths, the BMD, and the scanner. So everything here is basically from the statute. Do you disagree with that? Dion?
Well, I'm going to put something in the chat that I was reading up on where I think we may be able to challenge a voter if their signature doesn't match. Is that true?
That is true. Yes, you can challenge.
Right. So I put that in.
votes. But
Yeah. So I put it.
it's going to be hard to see those signatures because the voter signs in on the electronic poll books, and then they turn the electronic poll book around, and the poll worker can see the signature, but you would have to be there at the table asking to see each signature if you're concerned about that. And I think you might be comfortable doing that, Dion. I don't think most of the poll watchers that we're sending in as first-time poll watchers are going to be comfortable doing that. Helen?
I've been using the electronic signature thing. There's no way in hell it's ever going to look like my signature. It just doesn't.
Yeah. I think you're going to have a hard time with that. I know that we have had concerns. Francesca enumerated numerous concerns to me where she's actually seen people vote and then go home and change clothes and come back and vote again. We are aware that there's reports that type of thing does happen. I think it's going to be very hard to catch it unless you personally know somebody and you can see that it's the same person. I don't know. Do you, Sheridan, do you have any ideas about that? You're muted. You're muted. Can you unmute?
Can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Well, actually, I don't. I agree that it is hard to, tell the difference with the signatures. And so that seems like that would be difficult. But other than that, I really am just taking it all in, to be honest.
Right. I think, yeah, Dion.
I think there's a point at which you have to say to yourself, on what scale would this have to be done in order to change an election?
Good point. Yeah.
I think at the end of the day on Tuesday, if a whole bunch of people come in the last hour, especially if they all arrive in the same vehicle, then you really got to have a heads up, because I have been told that they check and see who has voted through all the voting, early voting, election day, and maybe they have a list of people who usually don't show up, and then they have a bunch of people come in the last hour and vote under those names. That's what Francesca's told me has been an ongoing thing. And so if a whole bunch of people, especially if they're older people wearing masks and hats and all that nonsense, and they all walk in the last hour, heads up.
I'm not sure I understand what kind, what names are you talking about? Names of people who have voted already or not voted?
I think that
pretend that they are people who have not voted?
The people who are working these poll sites, I guess they have the poll book in front of them. They're sitting there all day. And this is what I've been told, that they know that they check to make sure certain people who, I guess they already have a list of these people, if they haven't voted, because if somebody shows up to vote, right, and then somebody already voted under their name, when they check in the poll book, they're gonna be like, wait, you already voted. So they must have a way to check these names.
Checks. Yes.
Right.
Well,
but no,
okay,
they
so
punch in
first,
the name. And if that person hasn't voted, now people can communicate with their cell phones. And it sounds crazy, but I've been told that this has happened before, where they have like vans of people coming in the last hour, and they're all coming in and voting, and most of them are false identities.
these are in particular neighborhoods, I think, also
Yeah.
where this is going on. I think there's certain parts of the, sort of the machine that has been active in certain neighborhoods that people are more skeptical about now. I mean, keep in mind.
I have a question now. I'm sorry to interrupt, but should we see what Michael just talked about, what can we do about that? I see a busload of people coming in and all of a sudden, like, what do I do? What can I do?
I think you have to keep in mind that first off, there's legitimate ways in which that information is used. So candidates do that all the time. They go through the poll books and they see, these are the people that we were expecting to get out to vote, and they haven't voted yet. And they call their people and they say, get in there and vote. Like that is like a part of the whole get out the vote process. People, candidates contact voters ahead of time and they schedule them and say, when are you voting? Make a plan. Do you need a ride? And when they have those voters on their, I've, as a documentary filmmaker, filmed, campaigns behind the scenes, and I see them. They're literally listing hundreds of voters, and they know who their targets are, who they need to get out. And if those people aren't getting out, they're contacting them and they're like, get in there and vote.
Okay.
So so there's
a hypothetical example. If I do see some kind of impropriety going on anytime during the day, what is my recourse legally and from your opinion? What can I do about it?
I think it depends on whether or not you actually have evidence of wrongdoing. If a whole bunch of people come in at the end and vote, I'm not sure what evidence you can gather unless you can prove that those people are not the people that they're signing in as.
That's what I'm saying. Most people, you don't need ID when you vote, I've noticed. So people, do I have to demand ID? Let me see if you're actually that person who you claim to be voting as.
You absolutely, first off, you cannot talk to voters. You are not there to interact with voters. You are an observer.
Wait, but that's what I was trying to get you to see in the link. If you open the link and share your screen, there is a section here that says a voter may be challenged by anyone if they're, oh yes, it's right there. Like if you click the link.
I did click the link.
All right, now if you control F challenge, the word challenged, it should come up with a big exclamation point. So if you share the screen, those are the rules if you want to challenge those voters that's suspected, I believe.
A voter's challenge. Okay.
Yeah, that right there.
See, there we go. Okay, so the signature is a key thing. Can I compare the signatures? I could ask. That would probably be the best thing, let's say.
Yeah, that's a part of the rules if you scroll down further.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, I'm just telling you that this is instructions. This is not instruction to you. This is instructions, I believe, to the poll workers. So when it says explain to the voter that she has been challenged, it's not talking to you, the poll watcher. Poll watchers do not speak to voters. You are an observer. So
if you scroll down, it says you can as a poll watcher.
As a poll worker or a poll watcher? Candidates and poll watchers.
Challenge voters, yep.
You may challenge voters, but I'm just telling you the process. You are not going to say to a voter, I challenge you. You are going to be speaking to the clerk, to the poll worker, and say, I'm challenging this voter. I'd like to see their signature match. And then the poll worker would be saying to the voter, explain to the voter that they have been challenged, and if need be, have an interpreter there. And then we actually read through these statutes today. There's like 3 different oaths that they have to take then. They have to, they have to swear that they are who they say they are and that they haven't voted yet. And then they are allowed to vote if they're willing to take those oaths. So I believe that the process would be for you to speak to the clerk. The clerk is considered, the person, the poll worker who's there, and say, I want to challenge this voter. So if you really feel that somebody is not voting legitimately, that would be the process. Does that make sense?
It also says candidates and poll watchers may, and then the 4th thing down, be given information about who has voted if the inspectors are keeping a list. Now, so they could
I'm sorry, where are you? Oh, candidates may.
Right there.
Okay.
Candidates and poll watchers may, and the 4th bullet point down, be given information about who has voted if the inspectors are keeping a list. Now, how does that work? That they could actually get a list of the people who have voted, because that's what I was talking about when they want to see who has voted, and then they, by virtue of that, they can see who has not voted and have people come in at the last minute and vote under those names of people who have not voted.
Well, they have a list. They've given it to me before when I was there, and I wanted to look at the electronic poll book, and they wouldn't let me look at the electronic poll book, but they gave me a list of all the voters who had voted in my candidates, the candidate that I was observing for in that candidate's district. So
it's printed out like on a sheet, list of
Yeah.
voters.
Is it
that have voted.
names? Names
Oh,
or
wow.
numbers? Names or numbers?
they gave the names of the voters who had voted.
With addresses, I would assume.
I don't
Because-
believe so. It might have even been a handwritten list. So I just, are you gonna be, you think that you're gonna be getting into this? You're gonna be challenging voters?
Me
I've
and
never
Michael
done it.
Hanna will get in there. We're going to do everything that we're entitled to.
Okay, I would just caution you to be respectful and polite.
We are, but they are not. So we're going to be overly respectful and polite, right, Michael?
Yeah, you know, I'm going to say this. This is recorded and all, but there's a culture that exists with a certain political machine around here, and with certain people who are operating here, where they like to first come at you real aggressive with a lot of bravado and, you know, in your face, and the only way to be effective against them is to call their bluff. So they'll start yelling, "Yo, get out of here. We don't have to tell you that, I'm gonna call the police on you." The correct response is, yeah, call the police now. You know, there's no other way to deal with them. And then
Exactly.
they fold right away. But it's all that's what they do. And they go way beyond what people are going to try in most other places. Just like what he tried in October. He didn't say 66-5. He said 66-0 in front of 23 people, and he said there was 0 votes. They just go all out and say, "Go ahead, what you gonna do about it? You got to do something. You
So
got to
this,
be right in their face back." No,
Mike is just talking about an incident that happened in the county committee where, as far as he was concerned, that the vote, they tried to rig the vote by saying that there were 0 votes for one of the candidates. This wasn't a polling place. Sheridan, what's your feeling about this that we're talking about?
So no, so I'm just listening to everything, just taking in like the different responsibilities or things legally that the poll watcher versus the poll worker can do. And when you broke it down, it made a lot of sense. And I was just curious, is everyone here from like Brooklyn, or is this like New York and Kings County?
Oh no, I'm from the Bronx. Oh no.
Oh, you're the Bronx. Okay, got it.
We're
That's why I
talking
was a little
about
confused because I came late, so I was just sort of like trying to get up to speed. And this is going to be my first time being a poll watcher, so that's why I was.
Okay, so we have two areas. We have one district. I think you're the 56th district.
Yeah, the 56. Yes.
Okay, and then we're also doing, that's in Brooklyn and Kings County, and then we're also doing the Kings County is Brooklyn for people who don't know, and then we're doing the 71st and the 72nd, which are in Manhattan. And I know the 71st is in Inwood, and what's 72nd is what neighborhood, Mike?
the 71st and the 72nd, for part of their length, they run side by side, and then it's a little different. But together, they're basically Upper Manhattan.
Does it include Harlem?
The 7-2 doesn't go down into Harlem. The 7-2, well, it's a little tricky, but it's around 155th Street, more or less, is around the southern border of the 7-2, and it goes up through Washington Heights and Inwood. The 7-1, for part of it, is side by side with the 7-2, and then it does go down into Harlem. So it goes down further downtown in the 7-2, but for much of their length, sometimes Broadway is the divider, and the 7-1 is more on the west side, and the 7-2 is more on the east side.
And I think these are districts that historically have had a little bit of rough and tumble in terms of their election competition, in terms of what's happened there. I don't know how much evidence there is of it, but there have certainly been stories and narratives that have come out of these districts of some pretty rough play. So
Are you gonna be there? Are you gonna be there, Lulu, at ours at 71?
yeah,
On-
I'll probably go back and forth. I'll probably do some in each district, to the best of my ability. I'm only one person.
And do you have a team that you can bring with you and leave some people there so we can all be doing the work together? Is that
That's
possible?
what we're trying to work on, Mark. We're trying to work on that. Yes.
Okay, let me know about how that goes. Thank you, Lulu. Continue, guys.
Okay, you're welcome. I think we need to wrap. I really had hoped that we would keep it to an hour. Are there any pressing questions? Mike, hang on. Let me give Helen a chance to get in here.
I gotta leave. I will be speaking with you afterwards. Probably tomorrow. I'll try to get some information and some. I haven't received any packet yet, and so on. So we'll.
I did email you, Helen. I emailed you the packet, so just check your email. And then I think you said tomorrow you have a meeting at noon, but you could do tomorrow early voting closing.
I can do closing. I have a meeting from 10 to 12.
Right. So I'll be in. Do you want me to call you tonight or tomorrow?
Tomorrow after afternoon.
Okay. So I'll touch base with you, and we'll work on getting you. Can you do one of either the 71st or the 72nd, sort of upper Manhattan, this neighborhood that they're describing? Okay. So we'll plan on having you in those neighborhoods. And you probably can just close one location. You might be able to go to one or two in the, sort of late afternoon, and then go to one. You're not going to want to exhaust yourself. So you'll make one trip.
You got that right.
Yes.
I'm too old.
You'll make one trip, and you'll maybe do one or two other locations and then close a location. Do whatever you feel up to. Sometimes I feel like even 2 locations is a lot, especially when it's your first time. It's kind of a lot of information to absorb. So even if we just have you do one location closing tomorrow night, that would be good. And then are you available on election day on Tuesday?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So we'll hook you up with neighborhoods there also. And then Dave, are you available? Are you going to be able to do poll watching?
I only want to do poll watching with you, Lulu. So you let me know when you're going to be around 71st, and I will join you then. Okay.
Well, you don't really need multiple people at a location. It's actually sort of intimidating to send too many people to one location.
I need to watch you do your stuff and train me one time. Then I'll be sharp at it. Michael too, right, Michael? You and I, buddy, we'll go in there with baseball bats. Make sure that everything is fine and legal.
Hi, no one. I just need to be really clear here. No one is going from our organization with baseball bats. That is not funny. Yes. No, it's not funny. We have had election officials who have been intimidated and had their families called and threatened, and there is absolutely no excuse for it. We are a completely peaceful, nonpartisan organization, and we train people to be polite and respectful and to do, a polite, respectful observation process. We do not even joke about things like that.
And let me point out to the people here. I've been doing, I've been poll watching 4 candidates many, many times in the past. And there is always a tremendous burst of people who get in just before 9 o'clock. And it's because they have been, they work in Manhattan, and they commute to the Bronx, and by the time they get home and have something to eat, and then they race out to get to the poll before 9 o'clock. And it is always a huge push between 8:30 and 9.
Helen, in your experience, Helen, did you ever see any impropriety over your 4 candidates?
I have seen a discrepancy in the count.
Okay, that's important.
But the discrepancy was so minor that it wasn't worth challenging the election about.
I hear you.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up, and then Sheridan, what times are you planning on participating?
I'm going to say goodbye.
Helen,
Thank you,
can
Helen.
I ask you something? I'm sorry. I've seen your name, I think, on one of the Facebook groups. Is it Uptown Progressive Action or which? I've seen you
Northwest
post.
Bronx Indivisible.
Northwest, oh, okay, thank you.
All
I've seen
right.
your name a lot.
I'm
Yeah.
on the steering committee there. I'm also a member of the League of Women Voters.
Ah,
So when I put on my nonpartisan hat, I'm nonpartisan.
That's
Thank
how
you.
I met Helen. Sheridan, what days do you think
So
you can do it?
on Tuesday, election day, because tomorrow I'm unavailable. And then I'm gonna watch the video that you're gonna send me, right, from the recording from today,
Mhm.
and get up to speed. And then I'm gonna have to reach out to Assembly Member Zinneman and see, what she wants to do next.
Okay, that sounds great. So we'll anticipate having you in the polling place on Tuesday, and hopefully, can you do opening and closing? Opening's really
Yeah,
early.
so opening is at 6,
Yeah.
correct? And then
Mhm.
the closing is around between 8:39, right? I mean, I know
Yeah.
it closes at 9.
You try
Yeah,
to
so yeah, I definitely could do that.
you try to get there at 8. If you get there too late, they get really pissed off. You need to get there around 8 or 8:15
Around
at the
8 o'clock?
latest.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't want, if you want to let them know, I'm here, I'm poll watching, I'm gonna be taking your numbers. It slows them down a little bit and it aggravates them. So
Okay.
just make sure that you get in there in time to like let them know, like around 8 o'clock, 8:15.
8
But
o'clock,
we're allowed
okay.
to be there, but we're allowed, according to this, we're allowed to be there at 5:45 a.m., right?
Yes,
In the morning, the 5:45, okay.
depending on how good you are at getting out of bed. Okay, so thanks very much, Sheridan. Did you fill out the form? Because I don't have any contact information from you. Can I
No,
give you?
yes, I didn't fill out the form.
Did you?
Like I said, I just found out about this meeting.
No problem. Let me give you the Google form. This is the
Okay.
Google form. I'm going to
Perfect.
put it in the chat. Can you copy it from the chat?
Yeah, I should. I'm just trying to find my readers. Give me 1 second.
Or if you
lost
want to
it.
just put your contact information, your email in
Yeah,
the
that I'll do. Yeah, I think that'd be better. Let me do
Okay,
that.
throw your email in the chat and then I can send you everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lulu. You've given
Thank
us
you
some
so
great
much.
awareness. You've given us good awareness.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks, everybody.
I had a couple more